So, hello, Mr. Robin. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed. We really appreciate your help and your time. And for the audience, Mr. Robin is our expert for this interview. He's the operations manager of South Pacific Pocket Guide, Oceania's #1 online travel guide. So, would you like to introduce yourself further, Mr. Robin?
Yes, for sure. So the first thing I would like to say is that I am not actually from Niue. I just run a travel guide to help people discover this hidden gem of the South Pacific. South Pacific Pocket Guide is a not-for-profit corporation on which we are basically creating travel guides for all the underrepresented South Pacific nation to make sure that they are able to sustainably grow their economy through tourism rather than other means.
Great. So now we'll start with our first question. What are your favorite places in Niue, and what do you suggest for people who plan to visit the country?
All right, so I can talk for hours about everything I like
Yeah.
about Niue, so I'm just gonna pick a couple.
Mhm.
So one of the main one, and probably one thing that people will have heard about, is the Talava Arches, which are some really large arch just right on the coastline of Niue. And there's also some really small channel in which you can snorkel and see some really cool coral and fish. Another one which will be really different to that is the Togo Chasm, which has massive black, very sharp pinnacles as
Mhm.
you walk toward the coastline again. And then you go down a small wooden ladder and you discover a very, very, very small sandy oasis with like one palm tree just nestled in between the rock. It's really fantastic. Aside from that, any snorkeling spot through all the sea tracks. So I probably would mention sea track quite a fair amount when we discuss. It's basically access to the sea because Niue is a big rock, and so that's kind of the thing you want to explore. So there's plenty of snorkeling spot there, and swimming with whales, swimming with dolphins is pretty awesome. Now, when it comes to suggesting things to people that want to travel to Niue, they can check out niuepocketguide.com. It's our website, and it's free of charge to use, and you'll be able to find 100 of tips and all the things to do there and everything you need to plan your trip to Niue. Yeah, that's it.
Definitely, you guys need to check out his website because during the time that I work on this episode, I learned a lot from his website. Very valuable stuff. Is there anything that you believe could be improved further in Niue, whether it's service or transportation?
I think Niue is lucky enough to be such a small country that
Mhm.
you don't necessarily need like incredible improvements for when it comes to transportation.
Mhm.
You are more than welcome to rent a car for a couple of days when you're in Niue, and you'll be able to see a lot of the country, pretty much everything in the country within just that time frame. And then after, it's all about picking some of the sea tracks that you enjoy and just going down there and exploring. So I feel like they got themselves sorted out.
In your opinion, what are the reasons why Niue is one of the least visited countries when it offers such great natural landscapes, friendly locals, and unique activities to do, like swimming with whales and dolphins?
I think it comes down to the lack of know-how. You know, like people in Niue just don't know how to market themselves enough, and people from outside the world don't necessarily search for those kind of very very small countries. So that's the first thing, right? Nobody knows about Niue, and that's basically it. So that's why we created this travel guide and why we try to put Niue on the map. I think another obstacle to traveling to Niue is the fact that you have to go through New Zealand. So the only way to get to Niue is this flight, which is subventioned by New Zealand actually. So it runs as a loss business-wise, which is this flight operated by Air New Zealand going to Niue. So you have to make your way to Auckland, New Zealand, and then you have to fly to Niue. So there is a few hoops to jump from. There is no direct flight San Francisco to Niue, for example, which will
Okay.
drive much more tourists in there. And the last thing is the size of the market. With a country of only 1,200 people, they just don't have the capacity to welcome that many people. And to be fair, that's what makes it that charming. You are rarely going to see a lot of tourists around in Niue, and quite often when you are traveling throughout your week, you'll see the 50 tourists at one point.
Yeah, like I've read one of your articles, and it's funny, very funny that it says enjoy what Niue doesn't have, like no crowds, no traffic jams, like in other countries that people have been so familiar with.
Yeah, and it even goes deeper. Like you or even have like much worse cell phone coverage and internet coverage, so you wouldn't even be able to be connected properly. Which is, it's an actual luxury here, because we're connected all the time, and you feel compelled to check. While if you can't, well then you actually truly are traveling with that person you're traveling with, and you truly connect with that person because you do
Yes.
not have any other extra distractions.
Next question is, how does having a low national population affect Niue? Are there any pros and cons to that?
All right. So obviously, I do not live in Niue myself, but I've traveled there, and so I can just kind of see mostly from the outside, right?
Yep.
So if I had to pinpoint some cons, I will say that there is a little bit less access to services. There is no pharmacy, for example, over there, so you have to source your medication from New Zealand. There is also well, very low amount of skills in there. I mean, each Nguyen is actually very, very skilled themselves, but you
Mhm.
don't necessarily have access to, you don't have a choice of three different plumbers. You don't have a choice of three different electricians. There is one person that will do all those jobs. You have like those
Uh-huh.
two doctors, and
Yeah.
that's it. So it's just a little bit of less access to services. Another thing I'll say that it really depends on a lot on import, right? So obviously, Niue has to import a lot of its products, and they definitely will be able to be sustainable if they were still living, within the same kind of ancestral lifestyle that they used to have. But with the advent of modern times, and now everybody have on the cell phones and petrol and all that, you have to import everything, and so you're very much dependent on that one cargo ship that comes very irregularly, let's say.
Mhm.
So that'd be the cons. But the pros about having a low population is that you have much more rooms to be sustainable.
Mhm.
Getting habits to change on 1,200 people is much easier than 480 million or something like that they have in the US or other countries. It's much easier to get people to actually get new habits. And so I think that Niue is going to be at the forefront of sustainability in the coming
Yep.
years.
Yep.
Another good thing is that everybody knows each other. So as soon as
Mhm.
you ask about something like, oh, I want to know about the honey, they do some honey over there. They know the honey guy, and they will call him, and they will say, oh yeah, just go there, turn there, and
Mhm.
then you'll find him, and they give them a phone call, and everybody knows you as well. Like for us, for our first trip going there, we were going here to share our skills and create a travel guide for there. And really quickly, the word spread through the island. So people were kind of stopping us and say, hey, you need to come and take a photo of us, of what we're doing, and all this kind of thing. So it's kind of really cool. But ultimately, I think the best thing about having a low national population is that you have a lot of room to grow personally, right? You've
Mhm.
got to depend much more on yourself. You have to be much more self-sustainable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every single time nowadays in our everyday life, we literally just call a plumber and somebody fixes the tap, and you have no idea how
Yeah,
that
yeah,
tap
yeah.
works. Well, in Niue, you've got to figure it out. You've got to fix it yourself, and you've got to sort that so you can grow yourself. So you can grow a
Mhm.
business as well,
Mhm.
because you're probably going to be the only person doing that one trade in there, but
Mhm.
also grow personally. And I love that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I
I can keep
think.
talking about Niue forever. So just stop me whenever
Yeah.
you want me to stop.
Oh, next question is very interesting. Niue is famous for the special designs of its currency, having characters from movies such as Pokemon, Star Wars, and Disney. Do you know about the origin of this unique cultural practice?
All right, so I'm just going to establish a couple of things just to make it really clear to the audience right
Yeah.
here. So Niue is the country in free association with New Zealand, and it only uses one official legal tender currency, which is the New Zealand dollars. Now, those silver classic coins, which are minted and are Niue coins, and usually they are in very limited quantity, and they're
Mhm.
special designs such as Pokemon, as you say, Star Wars, Disney. They are an oddity, and they are not something that you will use as a currency. It's something for the numismatic world, for people which are collecting coins. And I think it's a good way for the government to raise money. They just mint those, and then they're sold on the international market. Nuans do not walk around paying with Pokemon or Star Wars coins. Just to make it really clear,
Okay.
they are silver
Okay.
coins which are worth hundreds of dollars. Like one of those coins is like worth $150 at minimum. So they're really expensive expensive coins. So they don't go around paying with that. It's just a kind of a way to, well, as I said, raise money for the government, as well as probably advertise a little bit the country, because yeah, those Pokemon coins were actually getting quite a lot of traction in international media when they came out. Yeah, and in 2022 they're doing a Mandalorian Baby Yoda coin, because obviously they do. Why not? And I also think there is a Superman one as well.
So the Pokemon money was never used as a legal tender, even in the past, right?
It is legal tender if you want to, but you'll be foolish to use a silver coin that's worth $150 to pay for $5 something.
Oh, yes.
No.
Yes.
Those are collector items. It's the same, you can find some you're in Canada right now, in the Canadian Mint, sometimes mint special coin, for example, for the Vancouver 2008 Olympic Games, they had some special coins minted. Nobody will ever use those special minted silver coins to purchase goods and services. It is just for collectors.
Yeah, they would rather save it for their very own collection.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And there is very little amount of Niueans which actually are collecting coins. So yeah.
Yep.
So when visitors come to Niue, are there any cultural taboos in Niue that they need to look out for?
So there's no major cultural taboos that you really need to be aware of. To be quite fair, it is a somewhat really well westernized culture. However, you do have to keep in mind that they are extremely religious. So you will have to be somewhat prude on what you're wearing. Making sure that you do have like semi-long skirt, not wearing your bathing suit outside of liti, swimming in the water. Just cover yourself with a sarong, for example. Trying to avoid bathing suit that are like actual G-strings, and just have something that is, bikinis will be fine, but not something that goes right up. Just those kind of things. Just, be culturally appropriate. Remember that they're very religious. Aside from that, there is no major taboos there.
Great. Okay. All right. So next question is that what are some of the most prominent cultural practices in Niue?
So Niue has actually quite a fun amount of cultural practices which are extremely unique and pretty much unique to this very small island. So a couple of them that come to mind are more like personal, so probably as a traveler you wouldn't really experience them, but they're kind of worth mentioning. So they do something called a hair cutting ceremony. So this is when a teenage boy will cut his long tail of hair that he has grown since childhood. And the ceremony is kind of like a big rite of passage kind of event with a large number of guests and family members. There is usually like a huge amount of food and gifting of money to the boy. And they do a similar things for the girls actually, which is when it's the first time that they ever get their ear pierced. So that's a fun private, kind of usually more reserved to like the family or the village of that person. So you wouldn't really experience that as a traveler. But there are, I think, 3 main events that travelers can experience, and which is quite cool in Niue. And the main one would be village show days. So each village in Niue has an annual village show day showcasing its crab, fish, and unga, which are coconut crabs, which are harvested by the locals. And it also includes the games and playing of like some local traditional games, which is quite cool. Display of handicraft, a lot of food for sale, all that. So the village show day are usually like a big ticket items. And when you travel in Niue, if you get to travel when there is a show day, you'll definitely remember it. Another one is called Takai, and it's a day which is usually happening around New Year, and everyone in Niue will decorate their vehicle and also their other transport method. They go a little crazy with that. So they decorate them a lot like crazy, and they go around the whole island making a lot of noise and throwing candies and lollies to the kids in the other village. So that's kind of fun. That's kind of a one-day event.
That sounds very festive.
Yeah, and one of them, which is the last one I'm going to mention, which is probably going to impact travelers the most, is the Koloama season. So it's probably the most unpredictable event in Niue, and it's when Niuean fish for juvenile goatfish, which are also known as Koloama in Niue. and the event can last anything from 2 weeks to a month. So it can be really long, and it typically occurs between February and March. And during that event, some of the sea tracks, so as I mentioned before, the sea tracks are basically access to the water, will be closed because the locals don't want tourists to go swim over there and scare the fish away. So if you were planning to do some selected sea tracks, they may be closed during that event, and you can't really predict when the goldfish decide to come out. So yeah, you've got to be aware of that.
Okay, that's really interesting.